I've always said that sooner or later, the Conservative Party will have to have a reckoning on Brexit. It is the ultimate albatross around its neck. They know that it does so much damage to it. They know that the vast majority of conservatives actually really like regulation, but when it gets to what regulation they want to get rid of, that's where, the specifics of it get a little bit more complicated. And eventually they are going to have a really big reckoning on it, because it comes down to that free market fundamentalist libertarian section of the Conservative Party versus pretty much the rest of it. But it is that section that has been running the party for the past couple of years and still is right now under Kimmy Badnock. But I think one of the few people who, in a couple of years, are going to be looked back on and thought, actually, that person was actually right about all our problems, and especially when it comes to Europe, people like David Gauke, who will be going over today, Rory Stewart, these people right now being treated as absolute pariahs. And David Gauke goes out on Conservative Home, writes his piece, especially if it's like this piece today, where he is admonishing the Brexiteers for, laughing at the political turmoil going on in Europe. When, as he rightly points out, look, Europe is literally just across the pond, across the pond from us. Well, the river or the channel, whatever you want to call it, but it's across the channel from us. But what happens there affects us very, very much so. And thinking and laughing that, oh, because we did Brexit, that what happens in Europe no longer affects us, is a foolish notion to think of. But that's what a lot of Brexiteers have been doing, laughing at the stuff going on in Germany and in France at the moment. And David Gauke knows this, that what he writes isn't going to be liked. And in the comments, the first comment is, why is this guy writing here? Why is this non-conservative writing on Conservative Home? So you can still tell at the moment, yeah, we're not there yet. Certainly for the Conservative Party having its reckoning. But I'll tell you now, when it does happen, oh boy, what a sporting match that will be. But don't worry, I will be there for it with popcorn in hand, just watching the fallout explode on it. But anyway, so back to this. I'm going to go over David Gauke, and of course, what he's been talking about this. And I think he's exactly right. He is spot on the money on when it comes to talking about some of this stuff. So before we go and have a look at that, we've got to sort of say, hey, welcome. If you are new, hit the subscribe button. Do remember to click the like and share button on your way out, or again on your way in. And of course, as always, down below there's the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So thank you for everyone who helps and supports the channel. And like I say, soon we will be doing the grand review of the year, where we'll be looking back at what's happened this year. It's been quite an eventful year when you think about it, but of course, that is of course going to be available to the Pony Club members and of course the Patreon members as well. So if you are part of that, look for that when it comes out. So as always, thank you very much to everyone who helps support the channel that way, and of course, on with this. So over to Conservative Home with David Gauke saying there is political turmoil in Europe's two biggest states, but beware of indulging in a big Brexit-based sigh of relief. So, for too long, the UK was viewed with pity by many Europeans. The Leave vote, the Brexit impasse, the premierships of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, whether the sympathy or even otherwise, European observers always asked what had gone wrong in Britain. At one level, it is something now of a relief that these questions are, of course, asked less often today. I agree with him on that. That's certainly true. This, of course, sadly, is not so much that we have now become a roaring success. We haven't, but these are, of course, concerns about economic performance and political stability are now being asked about two of the largest EU economies. Germany, once the powerhouse of Europe, has now the worst economic performance of any G7 country compared to its pre-pandemic position. It was once admired for its strong manufacturing industry, particularly by those who think that making things counts for much more than providing services. But now this struggles to cope with high energy prices and Chinese competition. It also has more to lose if President Trump imposes tariffs on the EU. Olaf Scholz, of course, does face potential defeat, and I will preface that and say potential defeat. And the German general election on the 23rd of February, again, we'll be looking closely to see what happens there, because that will have a lot of implications across Europe. His coalition was, of course, never stable, but has now collapsed. He will now limp on until he is at least likely replaced by Friedrich Merz, the leader of the CDU, the center-left SDP, as a junior partner in a new grand coalition. If the Merz government does fail to deliver for the German people, the far-right ADF will be now a growing force. France also faces its own political economic challenges. On the economy, it is not so much about growth, but about fiscal sustainability. Its debt and deficits are now too high, and it lacks the political will to do anything much about it. Michel Barnier tried, but as a consequence, became the shortest serving prime minister of the Fifth Republic. Populists of the left and right are now able to block any attempts at fiscal discipline and, of course, hope to force out President Macron. The political centre has now been hollowed out, but it is not impossible that both candidates in the next presidential election runoff will be from the extremes, and at some point, the patience of the bond markets will wear thin. So, European problems are, of course, not limited to France and Germany. Populism is, of course, on the rise on much of the continent. Far-right figures sympathetic to Vladimir Putin already hold office in Hungary. Bear in mind, there was a recent video clip that the Kremlin put out about Hungary's Prime Minister, Orban, visiting him. And it makes Orban look really, really weak in front of Vladimir Putin. Really weak in front of Vladimir Putin. And like I say, they put that out specifically to make Viktor Orban look weak. But back to this. So, and of course, in Slovakia, as well as Czechia, but also Czechia, I think that's how you say it now, are likely to follow, of course, next year. The election, of course, in Romania was disrupted by Russian influence, but at a time where there's still at least more support for Ukraine is needed, Europe is now ill-placed to provide it. And bear in mind, Slovakia and Czechia, in Czechia, there is, especially, I think it's in, I can't remember if it is Slovakia or there. It is NATO's largest artillery factory, and it has been providing night and day, running constantly, making artillery shells that are then, of course, being sent to countries like Denmark, etc., where then those shells that they have in storage are then being sent to Ukraine. If one of those countries suddenly becomes close to Vladimir Putin, there is a question mark now on that factory. Will that factory keep out pumping those shells so that they can then be sent to, in some places, certainly to Ukraine directly, or to other countries where they will then use other shells to then send to Ukraine? There is a big question mark on that. That is worrying. But one of the things that David Gauke is getting here through this is that problems in Europe are our problems as well. This is very much a foreign policy almost buffet at the moment going on here, and he's right. But what happens in Europe affects us as well. Just because we, quote, did Brexit doesn't mean that what happens in the EU is not going to have some sort of effect on us. And yet, this is what the Brexiteers seem to think. This is what they've been laughing about in much of this. And he's about to get into this now. So, back to this. So, with struggling economies, the political instability, the division on war, and of course its borders, the EU is not looking as impressive compared to the UK as it was. For some, this now reinforces the justifications for Brexit, saying that the UK, it is said, is now better off out, no longer, quote, shackled to a corpse, but are free now to make our own way in the world. And again, I've seen this countless times. It's either A, shackled to a corpse, or thank God we're not shackled to the EU because it's dying, etc. This is the free market fundamentalist argument that even though the European economy, by all measures and metrics, is pretty good. Yes, Germany and France are having problems, but it's not like plummeting off a plateau. It's progressing pretty well. But to a free market fundamentalist, that is a dead economy because it's not growing. And now you get, of course, these arguments where it comes in. This is the EU is a corpse, the economy is dead, etc. Because that is the free market fundamentalist world view. But back to this. So, as of course a political argument, it may have some force. We, of course, joined the common market back in the 1970s at a time when the major continental economies had long outperformed the UK. Again, what surprise is going to happen? It's happening again. It was, of course, an era of extraordinary economic success for the 6 original signatories of the Treaty of Rome, with their living standards rising far faster than ours. In contrast, through much of the 2016 vote to leave in the EU was viewed now as a cry of pain for those left behind. It was a period in which the UK was performing relatively well compared with much of the EU. We had not, of course, been directly entwined in the euro crisis. One, of course, of the biggest drivers of the vote leave was that our economy was creating so many jobs that we were now striking in high levels of immigrant labor and from the rest of the EU. At the very least, this was the perception of much of the public, was that the UK had performed economically and relatively well compared to the EU. That perception gave voters the confidence to support Brexit. And again, he's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. That was the argument that, oh, look, our economy is performing so well that we're having to bring in all these people from the EU to fill these jobs. Isn't our economy performing well? Well, we know what happened to that. We've got labor shortages in a lot of different areas because of that. That isn't good for an economy either. But again, he's right. Gave the perception, of that the UK must be performing pretty well compared to the rest of the EU. And again, he's right on that point, right on the money on it. So back to this. It is, of course, therefore no surprise that leavers now point to the EU's problems and argue that they justify Brexit. It is an argument that will have some impact. But here are 5 reasons why it should not. So let's get into this because I think, again, all these reasons, he is right on this so much. So, first one, we should not kid ourselves that just because we are out of the EU, we are immune from the difficulties that will occur in the EU. I have argued earlier that at one level, it is something of a relief that the UK is no longer viewed with pity by others because others now have their own problems. But when it comes to the issues of the economy and political stability, this is not a zero-sum game. If a major European economy faces a crisis, we will still be affected, and we should not get too carried away with the Schadenfreude. And I guarantee you this. I guarantee you this. If something really bad happens to the German economy or France or something like that, the Brexiteers, Nigel Farage, will come out and say, "Ha! Look at Germany. Look how bad, terrible Germany is doing. That is because it is in the EU." No, that is just their economy. That is the German economy. Yes, it is part of the EU, but Nigel Farage isn't going to look at the EU as a whole when it comes to their economic numbers. He's just going to focus on the fact at whatever may be going on in either France or Germany. That is what he will do because, again, he's a populist and he will make that, argument that we see all the time. Big sort of rhetoric, but actually, when it comes to the facts, if you were to look at the bigger picture of the EU, not the same. So, back to this. Some, of course, do argue that we are heading for another Euro crisis and that the Eurozone will not be able to be held together. We have heard all this before, and the EU has shown sufficient political will to withstand the worst crises in the past. Nor should we forget that the EU relationship we rejected did not involve membership of the Euro. Again, very true. Secondly, and of course, related, Brexiteers argued that outside the EU, we could commit ourselves more fully to other parts of the world. But where exactly? This was, again, something that they didn't bring up. Trump's America does not look like a reliable partner. And it isn't a reliable partner at all. At all. China, of course, is an important part of the world economy. But no one argues that this is the answer. Exactly. No one wants to do a trade deal with China or be more part with, do more stuff with China because all the Brexiteers hate China. So that idea is going to go immediately out of the window. Trade deals, at least available with the rest of the world, are of course going to be very marginally economically beneficial. The reality is that Europe will continue to be our most important market, and the fracturing of the globalization since 2016 only now strengthens the case for a closer relationship with the EU. Yep. Oh, how things have changed since 2016. Oh, how things have indeed changed since 2016. If the Brexit vote were being held today, I do not think that the UK would vote to leave Europe. It would not vote to leave Europe at all. That is for certain. Because you look at the world outside, you look at everything that Trump's been saying. Yeah, they ain't gonna go. The UK public would not vote in that direction. If the 2016 was being held in 2024, no, they would not at all. So third, Europe does face real problems, but we should not overstate them. Economies like Spain and Portugal, Poland, are of course growing strongly. Again, that is true. That is very true. Poland in particular. Everyone always focuses on France and Germany. But you've got a country like Poland, which is doing incredibly well in the EU. But Nigel Farage and all the rest of the Brexiteers just ignore what's going on in Poland. And indeed, Spain. Germany's and France's economies are failing, but what about Spain, Poland? No, because again, they're populists. As far as they're concerned, it's just Germany and France, and that's apparently the entirety of the EU. The European parliamentary elections this year did see strong populist parties doing well, but the largest grouping of that was now the mainstream centre-right. A new European Commission has been appointed and approved by the European Parliament with very little fuss. Fourth, a legislative response to many of these issues that Europe faces would be now closer integration, not further fragmentation. EU competitiveness would benefit far more from integrated capital markets and making it easier to provide services cross-border. The military isolationism of President Trump should encourage greater cooperation at a European level, not even necessary at an EU level, on at least defense matters. And tackling immigration is, of course, most effectively done on a multilateral basis. Again, he's not wrong. Why would the EU just fragment? Why instead would it not face this stuff with a lot more closer integration? Brexiteers don't seem to realize that. You know, EU competitiveness, again, more integrated capital markets. You know, why not just have one big European stock exchange, which includes, all these different, European, stock markets into one? That would be crazy, insane move to do, but it would be an amazing move for the EU to do, because I think it's France, Belgium, and the Netherlands did that a couple of years ago. But what's to stop other countries going, "Oh, okay, well, we'll join that as well." That would be that would be an insane stock market to see. It would have huge financial capital. Like investing in Europe would be seen as a hugely monumental safe bet. Because one of the reasons why the American stock market is so big and so strong is because people look at America and just go, right, investing in the American stock market, it's strong, it's stable, you're going to do it. But if you've got now a European stock market, well, now you've got two options, so there is indeed an argument for doing that, and I think there is one to do that. And I think there's something that we as the UK should also be arguing for if we do rejoin on that. But that's probably another video for another time. Anyway, fifth. So, of course, the focus on these European difficulties can, of course, result in now failing to appreciate the value of, say, membership of the EU single market. The point about membership of the single market is that as a member, we had very good access to a very large market on our doorstep. That is a very good thing. Of course, if the rest of the single market is growing at 3% a year, that is a better thing than it growing at least 1% a year, because it will be an even bigger market. But even if it was stagnant, it is a very big market that covers a large population of a large proportion of our trade. Putting up barriers to trade with a market is still a mistake. Exactly. It's a big market. Even if it's growing 3% a year, 1% a year, it's still a massive market. This is why America is exactly the same. Even if, you know, there's problems in America, people will still invest in America and want to do business in America or move their businesses to America because it is just such a massive market. There's always people to do business with in that market, even if it doesn't look like it is growing or having slow growth. It is still a big market. And this is, of course, the brain rot at the heart of the free market fundamentalist idea that if line don't go up, then there's something wrong with that company, that business, or even that country. So let's finish this off. So French prime ministers can, of course, come and go, and Germany and the German economy could, of course, continue to stagnate. But the EU relationship will still continue to be vital for us. For those of us who believe that our economic and geopolitical interests require a close relationship with the EU, our task has, of course, now been made much harder by the political and economic difficulties facing Germany and France. But the fundamental case is now stronger than ever. And of course, um, people saying, "Oh, he's got Brexit derangement syndrome. This is a pointless piece." Someone actually saying, getting it right on the mark here, Gauke talks good sense. It's a pity that some just don't like it. And then someone else says here, why do you continue on giving this left-wing Labour government member so much airtime on a website for conservatism? And someone to replies, exactly the point. He's simply not a conservative. Oh, yeah, just people making all the same, not really realizing it. that, oh, no one is going to care about this, etc. Although there are some people who are at least, getting it. um, but yeah, no, it's the same stuff we've seen time and time again when it comes to these arguments and conversations. So there's no point rehashing those talking points because we've heard them 1,000 times before. The EU is dead, the EU is dying. Why are you making this argument? But as he's just pointed out, it's a massive market. And if, okay, France and Germany are doing bad, then what about, again, Poland? What about Spain? That's doing pretty good as well. Then, of course, the Brexiteers don't care about those two countries. But Gauke's whole argument is, look, we should care about what goes on in Europe. We should have a closer relationship with them. And yeah, he's absolutely 100% right. 100% right. But of course, no conservative at the moment in time, as you can see, and through all those comments, no conservative at the moment is willing. Well, there are a few, but they are very, very much in the political wilderness, shouting at the rest of the party, saying, "Hey, you should probably come over here and have a look at this." But they ain't interested in that at the moment. These people, of course, as we said before at the beginning, like David Gauke, Rory Stewart, all these sort of pro European people, they were chased out of the party. They were treated as pariahs. They're still being treated as like that. But in a couple of years' time, when this reckoning eventually happens, oh boy, um, yeah, these people are going to look around and say they were speaking, the truth, all right. And I think that's why David Gauke does these articles because he knows full well, he's right and he's willing to sort of stick with his beliefs and that, and good for him for staying in that because there have been other conservatives that have, when they saw which way the wind was blowing, they went with the wind rather than sticking with their beliefs. So, as much as I do not agree with David Gauke on a lot of other his like politics and things like that, got to admire someone who, even in the face of, you know, of the stuff that he's had to go through for sticking with his decision and his belief on this, he's faced a lot of stuff. So again, same for Rory Stewart as well. But good on them for you know sticking with their guns on this. So as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.